Welcome to the Black Comics Universe, exclusively here on The Experience. Please help us out by hitting share and giving us a like and follow. Then make sure to tune in for our original programming 7 days a week. Black Comics Universe streams live every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern on all DSPs, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. All right. Good evening, folks. I have a few things I want to share with you before I get into my main topic, which will be my problem with Spawn. I've been talking about, I mentioned Spawn a lot in a lot of our discussions with my a lot of other comic book collectors, and one of those issues that I bring up is basically the debate as to whether or not we should consider Spawn to be black. But I'm going to get to that in a second. Right now, first off, I want to share with you guys and ask you guys, as always, to please visit blackcomicsuniverse.com. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter and subscribe to all of our social media. You can follow us at Black Comics Universe on Facebook and Instagram. And you can follow us on Twitter now as well. Enter the BCU. That's Enter the BCU on Twitter. Okay. And as always, check us out. We are presented by Peep Game Comix, peepgamecomics.com. Now, so first thing I'd like to share with you guys is my Black Comic Key of the Week, which happens to be Spider-Man number 48. This is the number 48 from the J. Michael Straczynski run. The reason why I consider this to be a Black Comic Key is this book introduces the first Spider-Man, and in this book, J. Michael Straczynski suggests that the very first Spider-Man happens to be Anansi, the African deity Anansi. And he introduces this idea to Peter Parker in this storyline. And he suggests that basically Peter Parker was not bidden by chance, that he was literally chosen by this deity to sort of be his quote unquote totem. This is in the whole totem storyline of Spider-Man. Straczynski introduces all of these. He introduces this new role gallery of villains that are basically hunting Spider-Man because they're the natural enemy of Spider-Man, basically. So in this particular issue, for instance, he fights a female character that's basically a moth. And then eventually he fights another character that's basically a mass of spiders. And it goes on and on and on. So that was that whole totem idea of the Spider-Man, and it didn't go over well at all. This is another one of those JMS things that he introduced to the Spider-Man universe that fans didn't dig, and this was quickly has disappeared from canon, I believe. The story has shown up in other spinoffs like Spider-Man Fantasy, where they introduced Anansi as a Spider-Man character again, but I'm not sure if it's considered canon per se. I'm fairly certain it's not anymore, but I really love this storyline, and that's my Black Comic of the Week. Black Comic Key of the Week. Yep, and please hit and share and like on all our video channels there. All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to get into my little diatribe about about Spawn. All right, so this is interesting. I'm gonna take my time with this. Oh, before I get into that, I have this sort of small rant, and no, it's not about Ryan Coogler. If you want to hear my opinion on that, you're gonna have to catch me maybe later on tonight if I do this podcast with my boys on Top 5, and you possibly can hear me go on and on about that. But I'm not going to share it here. But what I will say is this: last week, like I've been saying, is that what I've been saying for a while now is that there are so many Black comics in the market right now. And number one, that's why you should be subscribing and liking Black Comics Universe. You should be checking out our website on a regular basis. Follow me on social media, because I can help you stay abreast of all the books that are out there, and you can help me to help me get hip to books that I might not notice. And one of those books I didn't notice last week was actually a book called Soul Take, and from Scoot Comics. And it's a really good book. I actually went back to my LCS after I left, and I bought several books and realized that I hadn't heard of this book. I just came across it online just by chance on, I think it was a League of Geeks. And what was interesting about it is that I hadn't heard any buzz about the book. I hadn't seen any press. I hadn't seen anybody sharing the book online. What's up, Rich? You're gonna like this conversation. I'm gonna lay it all out, Rich. So I'm glad you're joining me. But I hadn't heard anything about the book, and what I wanted to say to that is that I would encourage any publisher, if you are marketing a comic book that has seeds in them. I would encourage you all to reach out to Black-owned media that is, really taking off. There's just as many Black-owned media outlets as there are Black comics in the market right now. So there are Black Geek or Blurred podcasts. My friend Richard Wright, also he podcasts and goes and streams live on a weekly basis on Black Comic Lords. You can check that group out on Facebook and on YouTube. You have myself, of course, but you have several other creators, creating content around Black comics. And I would encourage any publisher. I think it's sort of like, and we're doing a lot of research and groundwork in terms of, promoting these books and getting these, and encouraging our followers and our communities to support these books. And I think it only helps is if these small publishers, or these, and especially indie publishers, will reach out and basically, create dialogue with us as, creators. And of course, we're going to do our part and reach out to you all, and, set up interviews like I do on my show, and others I've seen it do as well. But I think it works in your, best interest, small publishers. I hope you're watching and listening, to reach out to us and see if you can create a dialogue, and so that we can help you guys even more in promoting your books. Because again, this book, I didn't, and it's not the only book that I've ever come across where it's sort of like I hadn't heard any buzz or hadn't necessarily come across my plate. But I think a part of that is because sometimes comic book publishers, they attempt to they want the book to sort of take off organically. This is sort of like idea, and I've seen this conversation before, where they believe that the book is supposed to just miraculously find their audience. Like instead of building an audience, that the book is supposed to somehow, stumble across an audience, or just happens to pick up steam by accident. And that's just not how, especially now, it's just not how it works. It has to be far more intentional. And into that, I encourage you, all in these, majors, the whole 9 yards, really build a relationship with some of these, black content creators like myself, because we're here to help as advocates for black comic book creators and black comic book, characters. So that's my little mini rant for the beginning of the show. I want to get into the discussion about Spawn. Now, I will tell you this, Rich. I have decided to sort of concede my point as to whether or not I will consider Spawn to be a black character. I will concede that point. My whole issue with that idea was because the reason why I took issue with that is because Todd McFarlane made such a huge point to basically remove his skin. He burns his flesh off. He has him draped in this, costume that keeps his ethnicity totally disguised. Yeah, here we go. Here we go, bro. He keeps himself totally disguised, and there aren't too many storylines about his ethnicity or his family or his background. Although I have found a few small stories actually, after I went on, a rant about, Spawn's blackness. I have found some very interesting stories, but even those stories are very disturbing as to how McFarlane chose to even approach race in Spawn. But that's a whole nother conversation. What I want to discuss is, the reasoning behind what he did, right? He decides to, if he's on record as saying, like, I wanted people to embrace Spawn as a hero, and not have, and sort of so that he didn't want race to be a hindrance to people embracing him as a hero, right? Um, and the idea that somehow his ethnicity hinders his ability to be a hero is one of the first things I take issue with. Is that why would he need to hide ethnicity in order for him to be embraced as a hero? Or at least I take issue with that from as a story point, And yes, and I understand that blackness is not a monolith, that we have all types of blackness, and we have a diaspora of black characters, black ethnicities, even. So even when I say black, I'm not just talking about African American. We're also talking about Caribbean. Caribbean. We were talking about Africans from the actual continent of Africa. We're also talking about Africans from South America, yada yada yada. But in this particular case, right, once you get away from the idea that somehow aesthetically or in the terms of story that showing a character as black is somehow problematic in them be considered a hero, that's debatable, right? What I find interesting is that from a marketing standpoint, what McFarlane did is not a new thing. What he present when he is interviewed about this, he gives the impression that he created something that was totally new, or that he just had an epiphany all of a sudden. As he talks about how Spider-Man runs into a racist character, and he somehow implies to the character, to this villain that he comes across or whatever, that how do you know who I am under this mask? I could be any ethnicity. How do you know I'm white? That type of thing. This is what he goes on and on, talking about in terms of creating Spawn as being a black character. And it gives the impression that he invented something around this that was totally new. And the thing, right. And this is something, right, because in reality, even when you look at this cover, he has all the elements of some of the most popular black characters historically, right? He's a mystical character or a horror character, and black characters are very prominent in that regard, with Brother Voodoo, Blade, etc., etc. his costume actually resembles a lot of the elements in his costume actually resembles Doctor Strange. Like the cape in and of itself is like sort of its own, acts on its own accord and things like that. So there are definitely a lot of horror elements, obvious horror elements in this character. But he's on the record as saying like he wanted Spawn to be embraced as a hero, right? And he didn't want his ethnicity to sort of hinder that idea. He even goes further that says he basically essentially Spawn is essentially actually him, right? He actually says that Spawn is actually Todd McFarlane, right? Um, which there are signs in the book, though his Al Simmons, the character in Spawn, his wife's name is Wanda, happens to be Todd McFarlane's wife's name. And these are things that he says. So it's like in reality, Spawn is sort of like an avatar for Todd, not so much a black character in and of itself. And that gets into a conversation about, how much agency some of these characters have in reality even when they're written by black authors, how much agency does a fictional character actually have over their own, story, so to speak. My man Demetrius, he says, I don't mess with Todd after he made cash grab off Chadwick Boseman's death and kept the money. I took huge issue with that because that happens to be one of the very only. I take issue with that as well with you, was what I'm saying, because that happens to be one of the only covers he actually ever shows a black person on the cover, and it happens not to be Chadwick Boseman, a person that has nothing to do with this storyline, and it did feel like a cash grab, and capitalizing off of the black fans that he already has, in his at his disposal. Yes, and Todd definitely speaks very highly of himself, JD. Yes, he likes to talk at length as to how wondrous of a person he is. But yes, his daughter is black. He's voiced portrayed by black people after a point. That I can agree with that. But at the end of the day, he's definitely using a trope that has been popularized over decades. So the first thing I want to share with you is that the idea of taking a character's ethnicity and hiding it in any way, shape, form, or fashion is nothing new. Okay. And I'm going to go through a litany of books and create and characters that fit into this idea that publishers have done this for decades because what as you would they would explain is that this is how they keep from turning away comic book fans that are in the South, for instance, or comic book fans that might have political issues with a particular character one way or another. And so what you'll find is that in the industry, amongst publishers, they use this vehicle of introducing characters by disguising them quite often. And I'm going to show you how, to this very day, these publishers still use this idea to sell books. And sadly enough, it works. I wish I could say that there was I wish I could show you an example where a modern book doesn't disguise a black character and it takes off and it becomes the most popular or the most valuable book in the market right now. But sadly, as I will show you, that is not the case. But I'm going to take my time with this and I'm going to share with you a few things. So we're going to go back as far as okay. Shout out to my man Demetrius. I'm not here to. I appreciate that comment, but to be clear, I'm not necessarily here to come down on top per se, because at the same time, I appreciate the fact that he, decided to make this character black. He didn't necessarily have to, but I will say that he is definitely one of several publishers that are using. It's sort of like they are um riding the fence, so to speak. You know what I mean? They have black comic book fans that are actually invested in this character and are huge fans of this character because he's black, because they know he's black. And you have an extremely large audience that is invested in this character as well, because ethnicity isn't an issue with this character. So it's almost like you have the best of both worlds as a business. You actually can have um, readers picking up this book for any number of different reasons, and everything seems to be, copacetic. But let me share with you a few things about this whole phenomenon as far as hiding, or I would say call it shrouding, black characters. So one of the first black characters in comics was in the EC Comics Weird Fantasy number 18. And this is a very known comic book. But what I wanted to highlight is sort of the story plot, or how this story lays out, right? So if you go through this whole comic, what you'll notice is that you don't see the character's face in any panel other than the very last panel of this story. So you don't know the character's ethnicity until you get to the very last panel of this story, which is called Judgment Day, that came out in 1953. Now, you can imagine what the racial climate was in 1953. And so what Dashley did, EC Comics, was actually pretty profound in terms of presenting a storyline like this. And, and to their credit, this is like the character was a very dignified character. It wasn't like, because, there are publishers that, chose to, depict black characters in a very negative light. And just so happens that this publisher created a very positive story with a black character at the center of it. But again, you don't see this character throughout. You don't know this character's ethnicity until you get to the very, very, very last panel. And then you find this whole mic drop shock value scene where you find that the character is black. And I wish I could say that, this company went on to have success after doing such a thing, but this happens to be the very last comic they ever published, and they soon went out of business. Not to and so again, this is another example well before you get to Spawn, right? Where you see a black character. And this is a very famous scene where we don't see this character until the very last panel that you see at the very in the corner that says the end, right? And the whole idea behind the story was that this particular character was sent to another planet to judge if this particular planet could belong to the whole some type of alliance of planets and things like that. And he finds that this particular planet that he visits still holds on to certain issues regarding segregation and discrimination, like, oddly enough, like our planet Earth in 1953. So, which brings me to another book. This was published in 1961. Now, so in the 60s, you still have this. What you'll notice is that a lot of publishers are slowly but surely. Yes, Bradbury was a big fan of that story, and he even wrote into that particular book, and shared that it was a very provocative and progressive story. And again, like, sadly enough, that company went out of business soon after they published that story, or republished it actually. So you get to this Our Army at War. And the reason why I bring this up, and a shout out to Alter Ego magazine. This is some of these titles is where I got this information from. And this is one of the things that I actually gleaned from that article. So our Army at War is one of these. What you'll find is in a lot of Army titles, they begin to introduce black characters, if for no other reason than the fact that a lot of African American soldiers were in the military and they bought these books. These military books were very popular in the military. Towards the end of during World War II, for instance. And what you'll see is they slowly but surely are introducing black characters into comics, right? And to be fair, what I am noticing is that these publishers, they tend to follow public opinion in American culture. So as the United States, as popular culture becomes more and more diverse, what you'll see is comic books become more and more diverse. So in some of these cases, they might be taking a risk like EC Comics did, but in a lot of cases, they are taking very measured risks in introducing black characters. At the same time, sort of trying to ease into what is, what is not what will be soon to become, what popular culture, right? And you like this particular book, and is a perfect example of that. It has a black character on the cover, right? But his face is bandaged. He's not facing the audience, right? And so it's a very it's disarming, right? So it's introducing a black character, but it's not in such a way that it is threatening to anybody. You could totally miss it if you're not paying attention. Um, and as which is typically the case, and a lot of times in some of these stories, a lot of these characters are colored incorrectly, right? So, and there's several titles where black characters were introduced, but you look up and then the colorist decides not to color that character as a black character, right? But even in this story, they are, again, you see publishers are slowly but surely easing their way into introducing black characters. But again, this is another perfect example of shrouding black characters in comics. So this is in the 60s, right? Now, by the time we get to this is another book in the 60s, 1962. This is called Space War. I've actually seen this book in person too. Um, what's interesting about this is another fantasy or space odyssey type comic. There is a voodoo priest character that's on the cover of this book, right? And you don't see his face because his back is to the audience, right? They go so far in this book by not showing this character's face at all ever in the book. And in fact, this character is the hero of this story. He saves the planet, and yet you do not see his face in this book ever. And this is in the 1960s. So again, shooting the publisher some bail, right? I understand the risk that these publishers take by trying to introduce these characters into the market. I've been willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? But what I find interesting is how these things persist over time, right? By the time you get to the 70s and you get to a character that's so popular, that's still very much a extreme popular character like um, Black Panther, right? Introduced in the 60s and 70s, another completely shrouded character, even with an amazing storyline and backstory, right? I imagine that they're able to sell several more comics of Black Panther because he's shrouded, because you don't see his face on the cover. You might see him and other characters in the book, but they make a point to keep him shrouded or disguised in the actual story, right? And this is just one example coming out of Marvel. And you will see that the vast majority of these examples come from Marvel, if for no other reason than the fact that Marvel Comics is basically, even back in the 60s and 70s, pretty much the center of the comic book industry, comic book universe, so to speak. But then he's not the only character, right? You also have the Living Mummy. This is actually another black character that my friend Marcus Roberts hit me to. But again, completely shrouded character, right? He's completely shrouded from head to toe, literally wrapped in bandages. But again, this is a black character that I've been following and trying to hunt for books for. Now that I know that he's black, but again, I think a part of his popularity and sell and actual ability to sell in the marketplace is because his ethnicity is not prominently shown, right? Um, then what happens? So as you can see, Todd McFarlane's idea as to hiding Spawn's ethnicity is nothing new, right? Publishers have been hiding black comic book characters' ethnicity for decades, and he also mentions the fact that he goes to conventions and he's supposedly he'll talk to some quote unquote redneck and says, this character is black, right? It's like, oh, I didn't remember, and but however, he's still able to sell to those people because they totally forget that this character is black. But it's also by design, right? He is hiding this character's ethnicity. And then what I find very interesting about the 70s, as much as we kind of loathe the idea of naming characters Black Lightning, Black Goliath, Black this, Black that, what I find interesting about the 70s is that the characters they present, they go in a totally other direction, right? And it's something I didn't realize, it didn't occur to me until recently, right? Is because I used to always make fun of characters like Luke Cage, for instance. I always thought that was, the whole idea, his connection to black exploitation films and the fact, his costume and, you know, let alone his jargon and what, and his slang. I just thought the character was goofy growing up. But the reality is that what's so fascinating that I realize now is that they made a point to show this character's ethnicity. You just had a decade's worth of creating all these black characters and shrouding them in mystery, right? And then you come around and you create this character who not only shows his ethnicity, but you make a point of showing his bare chest at every chance you get to show that he's not masked in any way. He's showing his body in any shape, form, or fashion. It's like there's no disguising that this character is black, right? And then make it, and then you get to go so far as you get to a character like Black Goliath, another one of these goofy names. Like we always bemoan those names, but they make a point to name him black or suggest that he's black. There's no hiding that he's black. He even has a peekaboo costume, which is bananas in and of itself. But it just hammers a point home that these characters is black. And again, these publishers, DC and Marvel, for that matter, are following the public opinion, following trends. Black exploitation movies are becoming popular. They're in their places. They're publishers like Marvel Comics are you know their home is in places like New York City, where these things are becoming more and more popular. So you see, they'll slowly but surely following those trends. And yes, Cage is celebrating their 50th anniversary this year, and it's a dang on shame that Ho-Che Anderson's book didn't come out to be a part of that celebration. But we'll see if they turn around, and make that right. But so yeah, and then you have my friend Richard Wright's favorite. You got my man Black Lightning. Again, another costume, showing his chest, showing his face, showing his ethnicity. Um, just so happens the afro is fake, right? That's a part of his actual mask, but even the character itself is trying to, um, and he talks in this when he's Black Lightning, he talks in a vernacular that's different than the way he talks on a normal regular basis. He's a teacher, right? But even in this, he is not hiding his ethnicity. They make a point to make it Black very large and bold in his logo design. Um, Again, we see that um, these publishers are doubling down on ethnicity in these titles, right? So like they are, they're following the public trends. They're seeing how where the money is flowing. They see this audience of readers that are gravitated towards these characters and these likenesses and things like that. Now they're not hiding their characters anymore. But unfortunately, the thing that I find amazing is that by the time you get to the 90s, right, what I find is that this idea of shrouding Black characters actually returns, and it persists to this day, right? Um, so by the time you get to the 90s, you have characters like Night Thrasher, right? Which I happen to be a favorite of mine. I think it's my probably it may show up in the MCU. It's a very easy character to create around. So I wouldn't be surprised if it shows up in a DC Plus show or a movie, right? But again, a shrouded character. You see that his eyes or his face is somewhat brown, but the rest of his body is completely shrouded in mystery. Shout out to Marcus Roberts again for hipping me to Night Watch, which I didn't know about until he mentioned it. This character was introduced in Web of Spider-Man, and this character is literally, and this is on record, I think, this is supposed to be a Spawn knockoff, I believe. His suit acts a lot like Spawn's suit, and you'll see that he has all the Spawn-like attributes. This came around the time where Spawn was how it first came out, and the main character happens to be a doctor of voodoo, tied to voodoo and the dark arts, so to speak, or things like that. So, but it's another character, superhero character, completely shrouded again, right? See what else we got. Shout out to Black Comic Lords that hit me to Silver Surfer and Midnight Sun. And I used to have this comic book when I was a kid. And I did not know that this character was Black. And at first I was like, yeah, this character's not Black. I mean, he's Black, literally Black, right? Midnight Sun. But come to find out, this character, Midnight Sun, is like the Kree takes the brain of a dead martial arts master, kung fu master, who went by the name of Midnight or Minai, right? Whose first appearance happens to be in Master of Kung Fu. I'm not sure of the issue, but Master of Kung Fu, actually his first appearance. And he happens to be a Black character who also, and throughout the Master of, who also is shrouded in his storyline, right? Completely shrouded, as he learns Kung Fu alongside Shang-Chi, the Master of Kung Fu. His face is completely covered because it's supposedly scarred, right? So literally throughout the whole book, he has a mask from a little boy to actually becoming a Kung Fu master. He has his face totally covered, right? He dies. He's killed by the Master of Kung Fu, the real Master of Kung Fu, and is brought back as a completely. And in this particular issue of Silver Surfer, again, you do not know his ethnicity throughout the book. You do not see his black face. You do not see his black body anytime during this book. He's completely, and a part of his mystique, a part of his power is his ability to actually, you know, disappear into darkness, into the darkness of space. So again, another character that is disguising or shrouding his ethnicity. Now, this is going in. So now we're starting to get to the point where we're getting to Spawn, and of course he sees the numbers. He sees how popular this is, and he's using this idea, I believe, possibly to help sell more books. I mean, that's the only other reason why I have to, that's the only conclusion I could come to at this point. But what's really interesting is this is an image book. This is the book he decides to launch his whole career outside of Spider-Man and Marvel Comics, right? And so when he gets to Image Comics, he's not the only image publisher that does this, right? You have Valentino, who creates Shadowhawk, another shrouded black character. This particular character, this particular storyline is a lot similar to the EC Comics storyline, right? Throughout this whole series, you don't know who Shadowhawk is, and he's going around. He's like Batman character. He's a vigilante character, but he's literally breaking the backs of villains, like literally breaking their backs, and he's, kicking butt all over the place. And you don't know who this person is until you get, towards the end of the series, and then you discover that this is also a black character, a black man who is totally shrouded, and you never know until you crack open the book. But I'm starting to get the impression, by now, we all should be getting the impression that hiding characters' ethnicity helps to sell books, right? That's one of the main things about this. You can hold on to the value of black dollars, right? We have a black character, superhero character. We'll end up investing in and supporting this character. And at the same time, you can get one over on people that might not, like black characters or like, ethnicity, a character's ethnicity to be a prominent part of the storyline by putting them in a, completely shrouded costume, right? And if you think, and you would think, okay, it's 2022, we have gotten past this idea that this idea works. And it just so happens that we still are at it, right? One of the most popular books right now, that happens to be two very popular books that are very valuable in the comic books market, right? We have Blue Marvel, right? And what's interesting about Blue Marvel is that the author, Kevin Graveau, makes a point to use this idea of shrouding a black character and turns it on his head, right? That he creates this character that's basically is forced, or quote unquote forced, to disguise himself as being black because he doesn't want to cause any social unrest by showing that a black man is basically the most powerful superhero in the Marvel universe. So he disguises his face and his ethnicity. Now, eventually, as we all know, he is, publicly shows himself to be a black character. He doesn't wear a mask. He doesn't hide his ethnicity. But it doesn't change the fact that this particular book is one of the most valuable modern black comics in the industry right now, right? Again, he's on the cover, completely shrouded in disguise. This book is, close to 1,000, a very, very, very valuable book. You can check out some of my other videos. He's on my list of, some of the most valuable black comics out there, modern comics. And also we have everybody's favorite comic book character right now in movies and in comics, Miles Morales. Um, he has a completely his he has another he has a completely black Spider-Man suit, right? More often than not, on the cover of Spider is his Spider-Man titles, he's usually completely disguised and covered from head to toe in black, mind you, right? Unless he's wearing his new costume that happens to be red and black. But again, he's hiding as his ethnicity, right? And even if he decides to take his mask off and never, hide his ethnicity ever again, this particular book right now is one of the most popular, most valuable modern comics that are out right now. And it's only getting more and more valuable, right? Once he actually shows up in the MCU, this book will be twice, 2 to 3 times more valuable. And yet, he has his mask off, but you still do not see his actual face in this book. There's another book, a previews book that he shows. That's actually it's not even a comic; it's actually a previews magazine where that's considered his very first quote unquote appearance on the cover of a Marvel magazine, and even there, he does not show his ethnicity, right? Um, so what's the conclusion that we come to? If nothing else, um, this is definitely a capitalist idea that somehow hiding or disguising a character's ethnicity brings more value to a book, right? I got some comments here. Yes, they're taking advantage of the Eurocentric culture's assumption of white as a default. Exactly. And since it's considered as a default, you can sort of bring readers in, even if you want to, do a bait and switch. You could actually bring readers in and say, "Oh, you found out the character's black. Well, you still are actually you've bought issue 1." Um, things of that nature. It actually helps to raise the value of that book. And um, and what's sad is that it works. It works. They continue to do this. The most recent black comics that this came out, there's I really commend DC for creating a lot of black characters and presenting them um, by not hiding their ethnicity. Right, the new Aquaman is black. He's not hiding his ethnicity. Nubia, the new Wonder Woman title, not hiding her ethnicity. But I would dare say that I Am Black Man is probably outselling those 2 books. And I Am Black Man. I Am Black Man. I Am Batman. That was funny. I Am Batman #1. Although he is showing his ethnicity now, right? He's making a point to show his ethnicity, and he's moved out of Gotham. He's moved to New York City. But I Am Batman #1. He is completely shrouded. His ethnicity is completely hidden, and which happens probably would be the more popular, more valuable comic. So, with that, I would like to share with you. This whole thing reminds me of a poem, right? My man Richard is going to enjoy this. Um, Whenever I think about this issue or this idea of shrouding um, black characters or shrouding um, or hiding our ethnicity, I really can't help but think about the poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar, "We Wear the Mask." Um, and that's something I like to, leave you guys with as I close out the show. If you have any questions before I head out of here, please, drop them in the comment section. Um, but yeah, the poem, "We Wear the Mask." We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh, great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. I'd like to thank you guys for joining me tonight. I am your host, Imani Lateef. Please, again, subscribe. Um, Subscribe to blackcomicsuniverse.com. Please visit us, blackcomicsuniverse.com. You can find all of my episodes from all of my previous episodes. You can find my Black Comic Keys and some reviews. I've been reviewing a lot of Black indie comics. You can check out my review of my man Victor Dandridge's oops, on a blank here. My man Victor Dandridge's latest book, which is yes, go Point of Authority #1. I also review Lumberjacks 1 and 2 and Hot Shot #10. They all have and all of those will have Kickstarters coming up pretty soon too. Thanks you guys for hanging out with me. I don't want to leave too early. How am I looking on time, JD? I still got some time.
Yeah, you got about 6 minutes.
Got about 6 minutes. Anybody got any questions for me? I can tell you this right now, what I'm reading next week, what I got coming, what I saw coming tomorrow. I'm very excited about let's see, about a few titles. I think Land of the Living Gods issue 2 is coming out tomorrow, I believe. There is a new there's a new title from there's a few other books I'm trying to blank. There's a ton of new books coming out tomorrow, and please support your Black comic book creators. Please subscribe to blackcomicsuniverse.com so you won't have a brain fart like I'm having right now, and you'll know what's coming up every week. But I'm very actually anxious to see what comes out tomorrow. There's a particular book. I'm going to look it up real quick here. It's Hannibal Taboos and McGowan's book that's coming out tomorrow. I'm going to give them their flowers and their shout out right now before I get out of here. Oh, let's see here.
Richard's wondering if you're reading the New Masters.
I am reading the New Masters, and New Masters is really, really, really good. I love the way they are. I'm gonna put this on. I'm gonna make it simple for you. Everything you like about Star Wars, you'll find in New Masters. What I find interesting is that you notice how in Star Wars they create these dystopian worlds by placing them on a desert planet, and then you have all this technology surrounding these what are basically Eastern cultures, what's are the pseudo Eastern cultures in Star Wars, and then they add all these technology and robots and lasers and spaceships. That's exactly what New Masters is. But what you'll find is that all the cultural stuff is far more authentic because it's set in places like Morocco and other countries in the African continent. So just imagine a world like that you will find in Star Wars, but all the cultural aspects of that world are far more genuine and far more authentic. So that's one of the biggest reasons why I love New Masters, and I wish, and I always say this, and I always throw Black Panther under the bus because I wish that Black Panther had storylines like that, more storylines like that. And without any further ado, I'm going to bid you guys adieu And please, again, subscribe to all of our channels. Check me out. And with that, I appreciate it. Thanks.
This is The Experience.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hey there, hi there, ho there. You're as welcome as can be.
Hi, I'm Nancy McCann. Welcome to Friday Night Live on The Experience.
Welcome everybody to Fat Jack's Comic Crypt. Brendan, Al, Jason, hanging out.
There I am. Welcome back to Kicking It with Henry, folks. I am your host, Henry Kumpa. It's great to be here with you guys.
So we are going to talk about books that are in stores this week.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mishmash.
Hello, and welcome to the Black Comics Universe, presented by Peep Game Comix.
And you gotta love it that the first people in the minute to skim it are creators.
Up, everybody! Welcome to another Wednesday Warriors. My name is Joey Galvez, and this is my pal Ambrosia.
Hey, everybody! Welcome to Space Cadet.
Hey!
What's up?
Welcome, everyone, for another episode of I Must Ask You a Question.
Hi, everybody! Welcome to Nerd News Now.
Hey, this is Rex. Welcome to Comic Collectibles.
Hey, hello, all you happy people. Welcome to the Dan Wickline Show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. Is the crazy show that we do on Thursdays called What's in the Box? What's in the Box?
Comic culture and sales.